A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Justin Jacob, and welcome to the inaugural edition of the NASSCOM Engineering R&D Showcase 2021, Engineering the Future, Advantage India. This event is the celebration of India's technical prowess, inspirational leadership, and futuristic innovation. With this event, we intend to present and showcase India to the world as a powerhouse of innovation, next-gen think force, and of course, high-impact service delivery. To begin with, we have Experts Forum, which consists of 3 expert sessions, each of which share a very deep connect towards furthering India's engineering R&D capabilities. Throughout this session, we shall be touching upon topics related to powering innovation, high-impact service delivery, and new paradigms of talent. Later in the day, the main event will showcase how the Indian engineering R&D ecosystem has progressed in leaps and bounds and the potential it has for the future. Before beginning with the next session, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to our exclusive sponsor, Western Digital, our platinum sponsors, Cyient, Infosys, Quest Global, Tech Mahindra, and L&T Technology Services, our gold sponsor, GitHub, our knowledge partner, Future Factor 360, and our social media partner, Chimps Lab, for their time and efforts. Without further ado, let us kickstart this event and boldly go where no one has gone before. Presenting our first session of the Experts Forum for the day, the secret sauce to creating a winning innovation culture. In this session, our eminent speakers will discuss about the importance of innovation for organization in today's era and the challenges faced by organizations to create and sustain a culture of innovation. As it turns out, the real challenge isn't innovating and achieving great success, but doing it over and over again. To get started with the first session, I would like to welcome Mr. Nitesh Bansal, Senior Vice President and Global Head Engineering Services, Infosys, who will be moderating this session. A very brief introduction. Nitesh is passionate about bridging the physical-digital divide, advocating AI, machine learning, and process automation to amplify business value. He's also on the Executive Supplier Advisor Board of Open Networking Foundation, or ONF. It's a privilege to have you here with us, Nitesh. Over to you.
Thank you, Justin, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending the session. Innovation has always been a turbulent process of venturing into the unknown. With ever-increasing pace in change in technology, increasing cutthroat competition, innovation is no longer about survival. It's no longer an option. It's actually become a survival necessity for global organizations. And what pandemic has shown us during the last 1 year, everything that we believed in that we were doing well, we had to rethink and innovate on it all over again, just to bring the resilience and the kind of sustenance to our organizations and its business process and models. Whether it's products, services, go-to-market strategies, processes, tools, technology, whatever have you, it's imperative that every organization needs to continue to innovate on all those axes. And if the organizations were to depend only on their internal processes to carry out that innovation, I think time has proven that innovation now no longer is internal alone. And we all need to develop ecosystems and bring in partnerships, whether it's startup or technology players or others, to actually create that innovation together. And like Justin said in the introduction, innovation is really not about It is not just about being able to innovate once and be successful with it, but really to make a habit of it and to do it over and over again. Any such innovation that we talk about cannot exist and thrive in isolation. It needs to go along with an organization culture that the organization is in innovating every day in the fail fast culture and facilitates that kind of thinking and welcoming part of the future and living in that unknown. To facilitate this discussion, I'm extremely proud that I'm joined today by two of my colleagues from to extremely successful global innovative organizations. And I would love to welcome them on the panel, one after the other. And to make no mistake, I'd read out their introductions just so that I don't do any injustice. So from the panel, Dilip Bansuli, a global technology leader leading global healthcare development center. As an executive director at Siemens for 10 years, operating from Bangalore, India. Dilip has last 4 years on developing strategies around affordable, accessible, and digital healthcare industry. During career stages, has worked in multiple areas, including business, energy, and industry. Dilip has global roles, having worked in China and various other places over last 10 years. And he has a postgraduate degree in technology from IIT Madras. Welcome, Dilip, and thank you for joining the panel.
Thanks, Nitesh.
And I would also like to welcome Dr. Alok Nath Dey, who's the Senior Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Samsung R&D Institute in India. Dr. Dey has over 30 years of industrial research and experience, including working at BEL, Nortel, Hughes, and with ST Ericsson, where he was the R&D Director and Country Manager. He's also served as a visiting or adjunct professor at IIT Roorkee and IIT Delhi. He holds a BTech from IIT Kharagpur, ME from IISc Bangalore, and PhD from McGill University in Montreal. He's a recipient of the Alexander Graham Bell Prize in Canada. He also received the IET Memorial Award for Distinguished Contributions in Electronics and Communication. He also received IDC Insight Awards for Innovation in Telecom and Zinnov Intrapreneurship of the Year Award. Under his leadership, Samsung has won National IP Award, Open Innovator Award, ASSOCHAM Emerging Tech Leaders Award, and several other accolades. Last but not the least, he is also a senior member of IEEE and a fellow of IE, IETE, and Indian National Academy of Engineering. Yeah, that's a mouthful, but I cannot be more proud than to have Dr. Dey on the panel. He's been considered as one of the most influential CIO CTOs of India. And welcome, Dr. Dey, to the panel as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. So to start the discussion, and as we were talking about the topic, innovation is no longer an option. It's about survival. It's become an imperative for all of us, for global organizations in today's era. So I'd like to start with you, Dr. Dey, to understand how, when you think of innovation and innovation culture, what do you mean by it? How do you explain it? Why is it an imperative for the organizations today? And what does it take to drive and sustain innovation successfully within an organization?
Sure, thank you very much. First of all, it's an honor and privilege to be in the inaugural sessions of this first engineering R&D showcase of NASSCOM. It's really a proud moment for all of us. If we just decrypt the theme of this panel discussions, there are very many loaded words. So to start with, innovations, as you said, the R&D engine is driving the business growth, and innovation is at the core. When you talk about innovation, it is about technology, it is about process, it is about business model. It's not just the technology. And when you look into our organizations, the kind of innovations that happens, on one hand, you can have a very incremental daily innovation that is ongoing of the spectrum. On the other hand, you can have a disruptive kind of completely discontinuous from yesterday. And therefore, it's kind of considered as, orbit shifting innovations like it happened in Chandrayaan. So I think in summary, I would say innovation is about, the essence is zara hatke socho. But then comes culture. And this is where the interesting part comes. It's not about few people's prerogative to innovate. It is about taking it from 1 people to 10 people to 100 people. It's a skill and it can be developed. How do you think of a process? How do you massify? How do you democratize this innovation process into the broader workforce? That's where the culture comes. And as you said, Nitesh, it has to be done repeatedly, day after day. It's not just once, innovate over and over again. Then comes the third term, winning innovation culture, winning part. And this is where in today's conference, I want to like to register the concept that innovation vector. Innovation is not a scalar element. It has a direction. It has to be aligned with the organizational direction. Otherwise, it would not produce results. The vectorial additions of all the efforts are extremely important. So are you creating an entry barrier for competition? Is it giving an edge to your product while selling? Is it inducing an wow experience that you could get? That's the kind of thing then you could get out of the winning culture. And the last part, the leader comes to create this. Leader has a big role because if so many people are working, it's the leader's role to orchestrate. Which winning formula to put? It's not always A plus B whole square you could put. You have to put sometime A plus B whole cube. When do you put which one? How do you create a sanctuary to ideate, to innovate, to incubate? And it's, as you said, Nitesh, again, it's not just about in-house innovations, but also fusing the open innovation alongside in-house innovation. So people brings innovation, process skill is bringing the culture. Winning is about product service experience, and leaders create the environment. When all of these four things work together, we get what is our theme is talking about. Thank you.
Wow, brilliant. I mean, that sounds like a success recipe, right? People, process, the winning culture, and the leader who comes and brings and mixes it all together. That's amazing. And there are just so many things that you talked about. I mean, I took notes. Innovation is a vector. It has a direction. It's not scalar. And that we need to put it all together. But so let me ask Dilip, right? Dilip, does that resonate with you? Do you see similarities, and what do you think? And why is the innovation an imperative at your organization or any organization of your scale? And what do you think it takes for organizations to be successful with it?
Absolutely. Look, I think what Alok said, the vector, vector is such a great point. I just love that point because we don't find, we find a lot of people with innovative ideas, but it doesn't have a direction. So you try to do something out of that scalar innovation, it does not scale up. So vector is such a great thing. I'll give you an example about a year back when this pandemic hit us. And pandemic has taught us many things, like you mentioned earlier, Nitesh. One thing it also taught us about how to be agile, how to be innovative, how to be vector in our innovation. I was, I'm in healthcare industry, and the healthcare industry was one which actually worked non-stop without getting tired during the time of pandemic. And I was during the time when everyone was in lockdown condition. We had people working in the factories and development centers, and we were trying to really bring in some products. And I was walking in a lab, and I looked at a person who was working in a lab. I just asked him, "Hey, what are you working on?" He turned to me and he said, "I'm saving lives." It got me goosebumps. And it was a strong purpose that drove what he was trying to do. And I could see the light in his eyes, and his eyes lit up. And he said he was so proud about what he was trying to do. And they were trying to do something in the shortest time that can really help people in distress. And to me, purpose, a strong purpose, gives a strong vector for any innovation that needs to be driven. And the organizations, for employees to understand the vector, we need to give them the opportunity to see the problems that are really being faced. Many times, we hear about having a ivory tower. Technologists sit in ivory tower and they try to innovate things. It doesn't work that way. Only when people understand customer pain points is when you start really thinking about possibilities. And to build that culture, one is ability to really throw them in tough challenges, give them the tough challenges. And the human mind always says that it can't be done. What we have done is the best solution that you have. It may be a first line of defense that people do it, but on the back of the mind, people start really looking at it. Is this really a problem? I think it is a problem. And then they start thinking about it. And the ability of the organizations to really give option for people to go try things and have a patience and capacity to tolerate failure. Innovation does not always succeed. In our startups also, only 10 to 12% of the startups end up succeeding. That doesn't mean that the other 85% of the startups were bad, but their ideas were good. They still need to continue to try. So innovation is always about, giving an organization ability to start feeling it's okay to take risk. It's okay to tolerate failure. And it's okay to continue to try. And those will change a big deal in terms of creating that culture. And I still, love that vector piece. The organization leadership is what should really continue to provide that vector so that it is directed properly and it has an impact on customer, it has an impact on country, it has impact on company.
No, certainly, Dilip, and I, completely agree. Vector is a great point, but purpose, as you pointed out, fundamentally drives both people, their motivation and behavior to move towards certain things. And from my perspective, when I look at, we are service providers to engineering companies, and we act as their extended research and development arms. And we've found that the best innovation comes out of our teams when they have actually worked together with our customer's customer and have become one with the objective and hence understood the purpose of why something needs to be done. Right. So examples of when we have been able to devise the best or design the best kind of instruments for whether it's consumer devices, whether it is industrial equipment, or even complex machines, right, which have industrial usage, the best outcome has always been when they have actually understood the purpose of driving that change, right? And I go back to Dr. Day's point of innovation can be incremental, can be small changes that lead to efficiencies, and can be sometimes completely disruptive from day to night, right? And both kind of things happen. The other point that I picked on from you, Dilip, which I can see manifest in or what we bring to our customers and that kind of happens is this idea of it can't be done differently, can't be done better. Sometimes because of us being an external workforce, the ability to challenge that idea internally goes up for our customers, right? Just because we are outsiders, we can bring a new thought. We're not bound by the way it has always been done. And quite often, exploring those new possibilities, providing that crucible to experiment and fail, and then putting some agility and scale into the operation is what leads to innovation. So great thoughts. Carrying it forward from there, and I'll stay with you, Dilip, on that, because you talked about this idea of organizations should allow people to fail. There should be a tolerance for failure. There should be a room to experiment and succeed. And to me, what you're pointing are those common challenges and barriers that organizations face in inculcating that culture for success, culture for innovation. Can you give an example that could be a learning for all of us, for all our audience, where maybe somewhere you have successfully in your organization or elsewhere, right? I mean, seen how these challenges have been tackled, and it has given birth to true innovation culture, something that will carry forward.
Absolutely. Look, it's a great point. I think one of the things that we wanted to do is to really bring that culture of looking at possibilities. And what we said is to bring that vector element also. We said, you need to come and tell us what your idea is. In our organization, we created a process of pushing innovation ideas to be tried by people who are feeling passionate about it. Create an idea hopper and bring in what your idea is and tell me why it is going to make it a better world tomorrow. How this is going to help a customer, how this is going to help a patient, and how this is going to help the company. And if you are able to come, it was almost like a Shark Tank kind of approach. And people were asked to come and tell us in 10 minutes, if you are able to tell me, then you get the money to go try your idea. But if you are not able to convince, then you need to go back and again come, because you need to think like an entrepreneur. It's not just because you have idea, you will get funding. So we created a pool of funding for people to come and do this. And I was surprised to see the number of people who were coming and proposing ideas. And people were proposing ideas based on their experiences. People were proposing ideas based on their customer experience. And some people were, bringing ideas based on their own personal experience. I had a case of one lady engineer who came and, proposed an idea that she wanted to really figure out how she will come up with an idea to continuously monitor the health of a fetus. Now we asked, like, why did you get this idea to monitor a fetal health? She gave the example of her own pregnancy. During the pregnancy at the time when she was in 6 months, the doctors told her that her baby is abnormal. And they all became so paranoid what's happening. They went to another doctor for a second opinion. And the second doctor said, no, I don't see any abnormality, looks fine. Then they were even more confused. They went to the third one, and third one also could not give any conclusive. And he said the next 4 months, 3 to 4 months till the delivery happened, it was a hell for the entire family. And only when the baby was born, they were so pleasantly surprised, not surprised, they were happy, relieved that it was a normal baby. Then that day she said, I'm going to really work on it. And it was a motivation that came in. And she worked on it. Okay, the idea did not succeed, but it created certain technology which can be used somewhere else. Sometimes, the ideas, you plan it for something and gets used somewhere else. So to me, I think that was a great way of driving that. And then also, we looked at creating certain days in a month. People will have opportunity to just work on what they think is important. They don't have to tell us what is important. Just go work on your own idea. And after you think that this is worth telling us, you tell us. But it's your day. Go try ideas. We'll give you food, non-alcoholic drinks in a place where you can go try, for 24 hours, whatever. And those actually created a lot of, buzz and more people wanting to do it. One area where I felt people were always apprehensive was they always thought that my idea is a stupid idea and I may be ridiculed. And how to get them out of that box of being stupid and making them feel that it's okay to be stupid. We said, before you tell the idea, you preempt everyone saying that maybe it is a stupid idea, but I have an idea. Then no one else is telling that it's a stupid idea. You yourself said it. So people were able to really come out of that, and young talent to the senior talent, and they were able to really make India as, I would say, at least several new solutions were developed from India through this route. And to me, that was a great way of really making people deliver something in their head to the product as a customer, for a customer.
That's just such an amazing story, Dilip. Thank you for sharing that with us. No wonder, Siemens remains one of the most innovative companies on earth. And I've started receiving some questions on the chat, and I'll encourage all the audience to please post questions using Ask a Question tab as you go along, and I'll continue to pose those questions. But turning over to Dr. Day, and Samsung, of course, has made it a habit to continue to innovate and bring out new products, fancy products in our everyday lives, and you obviously keep in touch with customer sentiment more closely than anybody else does. So I'm sure you have some stories around how you built that culture within the organization. What kind of challenges you had to overcome, and how did you overcome? Or example, maybe from, since you have such vast experience in multiple organizations, maybe from any of your previous organizations that you want to relate to.
I think it's a great points that came up, and as Dilip was saying, I was listening to that some ideas are stupid ideas, somebody is labeling, or a problem that stems out of a pain points, and then it becomes an innovation story, or somebody telling it can't be done. In Samsung, we say, do what you can't do, right? Do what you can't. So that's the kind of philosophy, and it is pushing the envelope for people. And you also talked, Nitesh, in the customer centricity, a lot of the customer driven thoughts that comes, and how do you encapsulate that? When I was working in Nortel, we used to sell this network, but not on the terminals, and a problem that comes on the terminal, how do you solve in the network? Because those have been sold out in the market. So there are many stories from the past, but let me take from Samsung's own journey. And when you talk about innovation, it is also important to recognize that there is this fundamental, and these days we are talking about deep tech. If the earlier tech decade was more about the entry-level innovations, the digitalizations kind of effort, all these hyper-local deliveries and services and marketplace, and a lot of innovation has come. I think this decade is going to see a lot of deep tech innovations. And for Samsung, both are important. As I said, the incremental as well as deep tech. First, let me take few things. For example, we were not there in the network business in 3G time. It is a minimalistic. In 4G, how we have done in geo partnerships and pan-India. And in 5G, we have been able to create a bit of leadership globally and a lot of deployments that are happening. And 6G already, people have started working, a lot of leadership positions globally as well as locally, that is there. So whether it is advanced communications or traditional field of computer vision, it was very interesting to see one of my friend, he went to Mount Everest and he carried a very fancy camera, but he used S9, it is a 2 years back story, to take the marvelous pictures of the Mount Everest and daytime and nighttime. And it gives us joy that these kinds of creations work in that harsher environment. And if we take into today's context of AI being applied into the voice technology, into the vision technology, data intelligence coming into IoT, blockchain being, kind of enabling multi-device connections. So there is a lot of stories that are going as deep tech, and it comes out at the end of it. So you won't see every step of innovations, but at the end, it's a big item. Let me also give some examples from maybe applied tech, because as we see customer problems and otherwise, how do you solve? Interesting thing was there is this smartphone and we had this tablet on the other side. Is there a room to do something in between, a phablet, a note? We didn't know the answer, whether it will be popular, but it hit. And still today, enterprise segments, a lot of people are using the note products. There was this interesting discussion of our washing machine. Some parts of dresses are a bit more dirtier and you may need to wash, pre-wash before you actually give it. And that's where the active wash was born. A simple tray, but it could be quite helpful. I personally have been involved into this iris tablet. And there the thought was, there is a high tech that is there, and Samsung also didn't have any commercial product by then. And on the other hand, I see in India, the Aadhaar was already using fingerprint and iris. However, the enrollment devices are much bigger, so you can use a big setup. And as the enrollment will be finishing, then it will be important to give a service for which you need an integrated device. And this is where we said, why not put this iris technology and bring it into this segment? And interestingly, 100+ applications through our India Identity SDK that got developed. And recently we've been doing on the social sector, some of these older devices, older smartphones that, earlier used to give it to XYZ as you are using the more fancier ones, but you have nobody else left to give it. And then therefore, how can you use them for a specific applications? Maybe in smart home, some surveillance, maybe some eye care that we have started with Arvind Eye Care in India and other centers. It's an older phone, but you take it and use it. So I can go on giving many such examples, but the bottom line is there is space for innovation in the deep tech, and there are rooms for applying it into daily lives. And there are enough examples of global and local. Obviously, they show up through patents and other kind of formats, but at the end, the joy comes when customer uses it and they say, wow, it's a great product.
No, amazing stories, Dr. Day and Dilip, of the kind of innovations you're talking about, the products that you can refer to and relate to. Even as a service provider working with global companies, I find that relating to these examples and being able to tell these examples is what builds confidence in our client companies and in companies around the world to actually look at India as a destination or look at us as a powerhouse for innovation. But we don't believe we've got enough stories out there. We haven't put enough stories out there. We see it as, when we tell customers that we work on some of the most complex machines in the world, the gas turbines and some of the most complex parts of the turbines, whether it's the blades or the rotative parts, high heat components, or that we have developed, the next generation networking devices for some of the leading network OEMs in record time for them to release in the race for 5G, in the race for 6G, all those kind of things. That's when they start thinking and believing that this can be done, right? So given that all of you have those many stories, we can say all those stories, but still we are not, neither are we a brand at a point where everybody would automatically think of India as the innovation powerhouse, nor do we see all these stories come out so often in terms of whether those patents or awards or those kind of things. So what do we fundamentally need to do? What does it take to fundamentally create India as that destination for both core or fundamental research and applied and research into use cases and applications? And given the number of questions I'm getting, I'll request you to keep your answers a bit short so that we can actually go on to questions. Some very interesting questions have come up as well. So Alok, we can start with you maybe.
I think one part of the story is obviously NASSCOM, the way we have started, even through this council, this first showcase, and showcasing is always important, the storytelling, that has to go on, and every company's, every citizen's responsibility, file more patents in India, globally, participate into standard bodies. Our visibility has to go up, not just doing, but telling that we are doing, right? And making that difference. So I think we have to be a little bit bolder and systematic in that approach. Nonetheless, I think two things that are important also to grow, because many startups are coming, many success stories in this short period this year, so many unicorns that have come. But two things I want to leave it with the people to think of. One is put the innovation into the context, into contextualize, and not throw out those ideas, because if the organization start measuring with single yardstick, it can be a problem. As we say, incremental to top, and it's all have to be measured in its own nice way. If somebody is bringing some algorithm from cloud to on device, that's one. If somebody is bringing from on device to a mass market model, which has less memory or data you do not have, basically you have a constraint, right? And you want to solve that constraint in a nice way in that context. So this is one simple point I wanted to highlight. And, some people works when there is an earthquake, when there is a pandemic, they innovate, and we are forced to innovate, as we said in the beginning. But if we can create some pseudo tremor in the organizations, which is not happening actually, then I think we will be able to innovate. And that kind of ripples are very, very vital in my sense. So that's one point. And the second point, if I can just quickly say, because what Dilip said before, just building on that, we brainstorm many ideas, right? And we get lots of ideas and divergent. And I talked about innovation vector. It's nice that you are mentioning about that. As we do that, that's great, but also the pain points. So there is this management terminology of painstorming, right? It's not brainstorming, it's painstorming, because brainstorming gives you lots of open ideas, but that vectorization, that core value that could come if you can do identification of problem, rephrasing of the problem, prioritization of the problem, that will be great, in some sense.
Awesome. Dilip, your views on what can India do and how can we be the prime destination?
I think, I'll be brief in this. One of the things, like I mentioned earlier, encouraging that ability to take risk and fail. The organizations even now reward success, they don't reward failure. And how do you really reward people who took chance and failed and corrected themselves? Reward them, recognize that. Then it changes the concept in the entire organization that it's okay to take risk. That's a very important thing. Second, I would say we still are not so connected to system level understanding of the products. We are subsystem level understanding. How do you give them a better system level understanding? It's a push that we need to do, continue to do. Storytelling is very important. We need to continue to talk about it, continue to publish about it. Customer is where we need to make sure in Bangalore and all, we have so many global development centers. How do you make sure everyone who visits any country, he visits at least one or two customers before he comes back? And even making a markets visible in India and making them continue to connect with the customers. Customer visit is not limited to sales guys and service guys. So that's important. Then open innovation. I think this is another thing that we need to really fill in the concept across the organization. When I say open innovation, I'm not talking about just outside, within the organization itself. How do you make it visible, how people can utilize it? It's not always about trying to do out-of-box thinking for every time, but how do you use the ideas that are already there, utilize it and make a better product? That will actually amplify and make more innovations visible to outside world. And India will become a powerhouse in the future. I have no doubt on that.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. I think a couple of very good points. Storytelling, of course, remains important. How do you make it a destination? How do you make sure everyone visits at least a couple of clients and a couple of innovation centers and gets ideas? And how do we create a center for innovation and a place for innovation across?
Yeah.
A related question from one of our audience, I'll pose it to you. How do we create a level playing field for true innovation across the country, given the fact that large companies have more money, power, and can support more of the cost involved? That does not mean, I believe the thinking is that does not mean smaller companies, small setups cannot innovate. How do we create that level playing field? Any ideas?
Well, I'll say it is actually getting better in the country. I know the government of India is trying to do so many hackathons. They are bringing in many universities to come into play for large companies to sponsor the problems and ask people to solve it. yes, smaller teams will have challenges, but I think the places like NASSCOM and other groups are definitely helping there. Even companies like ours, we are creating innovation hub where we want to invite other people to come and co-create with us. It is opening up. It is, we also, I think, we also strongly believe tomorrow is not about what happens in four walls of a company. It's all about how you bring in the innovation from different parts of the different companies together and make it faster. Because the number of people coming with innovations, like in India itself, the startups, how do you bring them together to make it successful? There are opportunities coming up. There are companies who are opening up innovation hubs, opening up startup incubators and all that. I think those are all the ones that one can use.
I think we don't need it to be a very level playing field, because you should put it in your context. And in fact, smaller entities would have hunger, because the biggers have money and they may not do always. Money doesn't buy innovation always. So if you are agile and if you have this drive, then you could go forward. And then government is giving certain incentives on prioritizations, even time to file patents. The startups have more, shorter time frame. If their patents come up, then we're trying to make it faster. So yeah, in some cases, some benefits and incentives should go, but otherwise it's your context, your problem. Do partner with others and get the benefit, right?
No, brilliant point, Dr. Day. And a related question on patents, somebody's asked, do you see any way to reduce the process time of an idea? Because when someone's got an idea, it can be explained, you can express it in a forum, etc. But if you want to patent it, it takes a whole lot of time, and usually, can make it uncompetitive or unviable in the future. So any thoughts on that?
I think it has become much better than before. The process itself with so many submissions takes certain time. But the US, the first phase, when it's kind of private, they start investigating, and therefore it is faster in US. In India, I think the first 18 months get a little bit locked in period, and then they start doing it. So it takes a bit longer, but all these bodies are starting to work. And PCT filing is also starting to have from India. So it's a separate discussions, we can take it, but it's getting better. We are not there fully.
There are a bunch of questions, which I guess maybe I'll take them, which are around creating innovation culture in services industry. How do you promote innovation while under pressure for customer timelines and quality and costs and ROI? So a bunch of questions, I'll club them together. And please do feel free to add, Dilip or Alok, if you want to. But my point of view is that innovation, even in services organization, is a key tenet. And even when we are doing a work for a client under a project plan and the discipline of delivering on time, enabling our teams to think differently and not to basically, if it's coding, then code the same way as it has been always coded in the past, or not to design the same component or same part in the same manner, but to think about every aspect of, how incrementally the design could be improved, materials could be changed, maybe reduce the energy consumption, reduce the carbon footprint, reduce the space required, reduce the weight of the component. All of those are incremental innovation things which, when thought about, can lead to either, core fundamental design changes or incremental changes that lead to a better product. And some of them, when working closely with the customer, and we've been extremely successful and lucky to have customers who've supported us in that, have led to filing joint patents for design changes, for new methods and ways of working. So it really, I think, comes down to understanding the purpose and having an encouragement in the system to think afresh. And in fact, conscious encouragement to say, don't try to just do it in a mechanical manner, but think about it and bring a fresh perspective to it. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, I think you covered it perfectly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm conscious of time, but there are many questions. I'll couple one or two together and ask. So somebody's asked, who should pay for innovation? Is there a moral or ethical dilemma around, how do you recover cost of innovation?
Maybe earlier this question would have been still a relevant one. Now, as we started saying, it's the company's survivability. I think it's an fundamental tenet now. And therefore, the company has to move forward to stay competitive, to grow its product. And within company, we can decide who will pay for it. But I think company is responsible for not just creating new things, but the new demand is about sustainable products and looking into environments and green communications, a lot of things that are coming up. So it's, yes, you innovate, but innovate in such a way that you take care of all the stakeholders that come into place.
So innovation, according to you, is like, you need accounting services in a company, you need, facilities to operate, you need innovation to survive.
Yeah,
Sure.
it's something, like it is said, right? You need to make yourself obsolete, your technology obsolete, or somebody else will. So innovation is not an option that you have. It's a mandatory need that you need to continue to invent, innovate, and make the progress. And company definitely has to do that.
And I just want to jump in, and very important that many people in the organization keep this as a separate, maybe an innovation and something else, but it will not work that way. We are talking about winning innovation culture, and it's spreading to the others. It's democratization, it's the skill building. So it has to be sipped in. It's not even a separate department, because I heard you. I don't think it works that way. It can work for a while when you start, or some special things you can work that way. It has to be sipped in into everybody's mindset to do things differently. When you come every day, you do things differently. That's what is innovation.
Brilliant. Yep. Awesome. Gentlemen, I think we can continue discussing this forever. It's such an interesting topic, and the discussion with both of you just makes it ever so interesting that we can go on. And I can see our audience getting warmed up because there are just so many questions flowing in. And unfortunately, the time is short, the day must go on, and we cannot cover every question. But I will, through NASSCOM, we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. But at this point, with all the great, points that you guys made, whether it's about the vector, the purpose, the incremental innovation, the idea of telling stories and creating that ability to fail within an organization and celebrate the spirit of bringing an idea forward. I just loved it. Couldn't have been a better topic for discussion for starting off the Engineering and R&D Summit. And thank you so much for being here and participating in it along with me. Back to you.
Great talking to you, Nitesh, and hello. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Nitesh Bansal, for moderating that expert session, our first for today. And of course, thank you, Dilip and Dr. Alok Nath, for joining us on the panel. Thank you to all the panel members for that deeply insightful session on the secret sauce to create a winning innovation culture. And like any good sauce, there are so many ingredients that go into making it a winning product, so many interesting takeaways there. We heard about innovation, vector, people, process, leadership, purpose, and of course, a winning culture, the secret ingredients. Well, nurturing and sustaining a culture of innovation is truly the need of the hour for the ER&D organizations. Well, I hope our viewers enjoyed that session and were able to take home a few best practices related to innovation. We'd also like to thank the audience for being active and having those remarkable questions coming in. So keep those questions coming in for all our sessions. All right. The next session on the Experts Forum is New Talent Paradigms in Engineering R&D. In this session, our eminent speakers will touch upon a few key points pertaining to winning the war of talent, moving towards future of work, and shifting to create a remote work model in context of the new normal post-pandemic. To get started with the session, I'd like to welcome Sumit Sood, Group Vice President and Head of APAC Global Logic, who will be moderating the session. A brief introduction. With over 2 decades of experience in the IT industry, Sumit has a long history of building highly motivated and self-driven teams. He also focuses on helping organizations build and implement their digital strategies, from expanding their online presence to integrating IoT-enabled ecosystem. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Sumit. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you very much. And it's a very, very interesting topic that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about today. Just in the previous session, I heard Alok talking about that innovation has become key to survival for a lot of businesses. Can you still hear me okay, Jacob?
The volume is very low.
Just totally lost my audio. So okay. One of you will have to say something. Sorry about that, gentlemen. A little bit of a technical glitch at my side. I am not able to hear.
We can hear you, Sumit, but the voice is a little feeble, though.
Of a technical glitch, but hopefully we should be able to get rolling now. So very interesting conversation that was happening, where the point was that talent is so critical to innovation and hence to company survival. And what's been happening over the last few months, right? Anybody from the industry who we talk to is talking about record growth and record attrition, which is talking about a lot of great demand in the industry. That's a good indicator. We have also been going through the pandemic over the last over a year now, and that has sort of laid bare the fact that people can work from anywhere and everywhere. So it started to become location agnostic. And then the evolution of the tech world, what we used to be talking about as smack in the past, is suddenly now dark within a few 5 or 6 odd years. So there's a great confluence of these 3 factors of high demand, very rapidly evolving technology, and the ability to work from anywhere. And to dissect this situation, this opportunity a bit, I have 2 great panelists with me, 2 eminent panelists with me who have great credentials. I would introduce them briefly. Let's start with Anand, who's currently the managing director at Micron India. But more importantly, he started his life as a hands-on chip engineer. And I always say for engineers, right, they're like surgeons. Once a surgeon, always a surgeon. So as Anand has transcended his journey from a chip engineer to an executive at Intel and now to the managing director at Micron India, I'm sure he would have a lot of insights into the evolution of this talent paradigm, from what it means for an individual engineer to what it means for corporations who are looking to engage with this talent and in this paradigm. The other eminent panelist I have with me is Raghav Gulur, who is currently the SVP and Global Head of Integrated Engineering Solutions at TechM, again, a fantastic organization. Interestingly, Raghav also started his life as an embedded control system software engineer. So starting from there, growing to be a supervisory board member at Electrobit and an executive board member at Continental India, and now a senior executive at TechM. again, I'm sure that all of us can benefit across the industry and across the participants from your wisdom. So welcome to the panel, gentlemen, and look forward to a very interesting discussion with both of you.
Thanks, Sumit.
Thank you, Sumit.
I'll start with the first part that we spoke about, right? The record demand that we are seeing in the industry. And if you look at our past track record in the engineering and R&D sector, we have roughly been growing at a 10% CAGR over the last decade. We're roughly a $30 billion industry now. But if we look at the outlook for the next 10 years, it is 3x, that we need to go from 30 billion to 90 billion. Clearly, what got us here will not get us there. I'll start with you, Raghav, maybe. What do you see as key challenges for India Inc., if you will, to capture this growth seamlessly? Where do you see talent fitting in this whole paradigm?
Thanks, Sumit. Thanks for that introduction and also this excellent question. Only thing is that what has brought us here certainly helps, because there were days when we started engineering R&D in India, when people thought that it can never be done in India. It has to be done in the client space. But now, after a couple of decades, we have been the home for many large corporations, the largest R&D centers outside their home country. I think we've come a long way. But certainly, to grow to multiple X, it's different. The acceleration is coming basically because the engineering part is changing. What is changing in engineering is software, data, and data. That is what is driving engineering. And that brings the acceleration to this growth in multiple X. For me, a couple of challenges that I see is one, certainly the skill and knowledge management challenges. The other one is the innovation challenge. If you look at the skill challenges, I think recently the NASSCOM had published a report which says that the demand for digital skill today, this is what is driving the future of R&D, is about 8 times the supply, and then it would go to about 20 times in 5 years. And this is something which is emerging. So can you really go and hire these consultants from the market? May not. So how do we really manage this on one side? And the second thing is that this is all the skill part, but the knowledge management part is that according to an IBM study, which is an extension of Mr. Buckminster study, it said that the knowledge doubles now every 10 to 12 hours. That is in a day, that just doubles, which was just about 10 to 12 months a couple of decades ago. And similarly, another study, if you look at the Schopel's technology study, it says that the fastest decaying knowledge is the IT knowledge or the knowledge industry. So whatever you have today, only 50% of that will remain or useful after 12 to 18 months. So in this kind of situation, it is not only managing the talents that it is a challenge, but also how do we really develop the skill and then retain and to the dynamics of the industry, making it competitive all the time. That is what I see as a challenge. On the skill and management, knowledge management side. On the innovation side, I see that the investment in R&D, how exactly the ecosystem is really getting developed here. That is something which we need to really look at, because if you look at the developed countries or even China, they're close to about 500 billion they invest in R&D. If you look at India, it's only lower the part of double digit. And then it's also about 0.7 or 0.9% of GDP, which is lower than the BRICS countries. So how do we really bring in this innovation culture here, ecosystem, which can help us? The first one can really take us organic growth, can give us organic growth. The second one probably can give us the exponential or inorganic growth. Specifically, the ideas, the products can come from India to the global market. I will only say that probably this in this context, not to just go away, but the NASSCOM's Innovation Award probably is one of those things that can really bringing out the role models. What are they doing differently? Can help us provide, for some of the companies can really provide an awareness and then a path to really grow in that direction as well.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Raghav. Anand, especially in the chip design world and in the world that Micron is operating in, as an example, when you look at the industry growth that the engineering R&D sector overall is talking about, how do you see that playing, especially with the proliferation of IoT for companies like yourselves? And what is your take from that lens, from a talent perspective, right? Because the typical software talent versus some of the talent that you need, it comes at a different axis. It also is an axis which the world talks about that, hey, maybe Eastern Europe is better known for. So how are you folks looking at this? How are you tackling it? And is this something that you see as a growth vector for India as well as we move forward?
Sure, Sumit, and some excellent points from Raghav. As you rightly said, right, some of the opportunities and challenges we see in semiconductor are a little unique compared to the traditional IT or software sector. But yeah, as I say, charity begins at home. At Micron, we kind of grew from almost nothing to around 2,500 professionals in less than 2 years, right? And that tells you that, hey, listen, can be done, it needs to be done. And so clearly, there is no question about the need or the demand part of the vector. I think almost all the semiconductor companies that I know of have a strong India footprint, and have managed to grow both secularly and non-linearly in the last couple of decades. So clearly, no challenge of the demand part of the equation. With respect to the talent quotient, I will digress and tell you a small story. When we started the operation, we had the usual set of questions from some of our leaders about cost arbitrage, cost of setting up operation, do you have the infrastructure, the usual questions you would expect. But very soon they've all gone away. And in fact, the benefits that the government talks about, the industry bodies talk about, are actually not even in the mix anymore. The only question I get is, can you hire enough good quality people to go and get the job done for us, right? So it's almost like the traditional benefits of economic arbitrage, utility benefits, infra benefits are almost reached a point of diminishing return. No one bothers about that anymore. So talent, as we all know, is the only arbiter. If you have that arbitrage, you have a chance to grow. Now, while the Indian scale, the beauty of India is always scale. We all know that. The bottom of the talent pyramid is what we always proudly talk about. It's very helpful and useful. We're beginning to struggle a little bit as we move towards the top of the pyramid, because what we're finding is, especially in semiconductor, some of the pieces that are necessary for front-end, back-end, upstream, downstream innovation and work are missing. Semiconductor manufacturing is missing. Of course, I don't want to say it because the follow-up question is Micron setting up a plant in the country? But the fact is you don't have manufacturing in the country, so a lot of the manufacturing-led processes and innovations are not going to show up in a prominent way, right? That said, the core R&D is still meaty, substantial. We have some challenges at the top of the pyramid, Sumit, where the tenured engineers, subject matter experts, unfortunately, we have a little bit of a culture where people shift roles and jobs too quickly. And as a result, when I compare some of our amazing engineers, their tenure track, their ability to go and sit through a certain workflow in terms of skill building and talent building is a little limiting. And the success has come on the strength of companies' own playbooks. We all have our own playbooks. We have played it really well. The contribution from the broader ecosystem, the government, industry body is happening, but I don't think we have that maturity where we can say, especially for semiconductors, where we can say, hey, listen, I'm benefiting from everything around me. I'm largely benefiting from what's happening within me, within the company. So that's the one that I worry about, but I see it as an opportunity. I want to be positive about all that. So.
Fantastic. You trigger a very interesting thought, Anand, right? So you said there's a challenge at the top of the pyramid. Does COVID give India an opportunity to trigger a reverse brain drain? Is it now a possibility for somebody to be sitting in Silicon Valley and actually be working for a company in India to fix that gap at the top of the pyramid? Do you think that the evolving talent paradigm would see stuff like that happening, or is that something that you folks are thinking about or looking to trigger?
We are thinking about it, Sumit. In fact, two things have happened post-COVID, around COVID. One is we've seen, I'm sure it's true for many other companies, we've seen a steady flow of talent and resource from different parts of the world. Memory is niche. There are only 3 or 4 players who make memory of any substantial material in a material way. We are one of them. So we've got people moving from Singapore, US, and parts of Europe. So we're seeing that happen for a variety of reasons: geopolitical, COVID, coming back to family, personal reasons. So clearly that is no more a trickle. It's much more than a trickle. So that's one. And to your earlier comment, I think it's become truly globalized, Sumit. I think what we are realizing is, on one hand, the concept of a center of excellence, as we used to call it, and we used to be very proud of it. Hey, listen, India wants to be a center of excellence. That's getting a little challenged because as part of BCP and continuity planning, you want to mirror a lot of competencies.
Yep.
You don't want one set of skills to be concentrated in one region or one site. So we often see a lot of mirroring. The advantage of mirroring is what India would be good at, you try to replicate some of it in some other part of the world and vice versa. So net is a zero-sum game because you're building a lot more competency sites, maybe some overlap. So we are seeing that it's become more global collaboration. There is a worry about disproportionate concentration of competencies in one site. That may go away over time. None of us have a crystal ball to predict what 3 years down the line may look like. But one thing is for sure, the broad basing and globalization of talent is certainly happening for sure.
Fantastic. And Raghav, so Micron is still it's an enterprise, and they are looking at this as one global integrated umbrella in the services world that you and I come from, and where again the top of the pyramid talent is always something that everybody is hungry for. How do you see that globalization impacting? And to Anand's point, will India Inc. possibly go out and tap into global talent, and will that change the let me not say behavior, will that change the modus operandi of people looking to stick more to workflows and figuring out what the end-to-end looks like rather than shifting roles or jobs much sooner? What's your take? How do you see this evolving?
Probably what COVID in the last couple of years has brought is that technologically it is certainly possible. There's no doubt about it. I mean, people are having doubts about it, but I think in the last couple of weeks, the way the industry has come up to really deliver from anywhere, I think that has really was quite quick, and then that has been established. But specifically when it comes to engineering R&D, maybe I have, just complementing what Anand was saying. I also say that managing things from the home country could be a challenge. Because most of the times it depends on people, process, and also the behavior of the people and the culture of the people. So from that perspective, I say that one need to be careful, because when some of these captive centers, when they set it up, they try to manage, and soon they realize that maybe you need to have somebody who really interface. So maybe there is a mid-part. That's what I was trying to say. Whether you can really manage everything from there or manage everything from here, maybe there's a little further to come up and say how exactly it can be reached. And to the question that you asked, whether we can really tap into the global market, yes, certainly there is no doubt about it. But at the same time, if you really look at in the engineering R&D, what is really driving it is software, and that is what we have come from in India. We have started from the software side. The Western world actually, from whether you look at the engineering industry, I'm not talking about the semicon, but the other engineering product companies, whether it is automotive, aerospace, defense, or whatever it is, mostly it is from the mechanical side. Now, when software, data, and digital is driving it, I think I see a lot of what you call the acquisitions or companies to acquire this particular knowledge, because they need to move fast. And that is what we are seeing. Even if you really look at in the last 12 months, some of these large deals that have happened in the industry, I think with some of these services companies, is basically to make sure that they have this complementation that comes in to accelerate their products into the market much faster. That's what I see from my perspective.
Fair enough. Tell me something, Raghav. So I'm a young engineer, and not me per se. I'm just taking a persona. When I can be sitting in Goa and working for New York or for Silicon Valley, what does that do to, on the reverse side of things, to the talent game? And what do you think? I think even in the previous panel, there was a discussion about SMEs and how they can innovate and their asks. How do you see that evolving and shaping? How do you think, especially upcoming R&D organizations or upcoming products, how do they keep up with this sort of a situation? Because I can be in a lounge chair under a nice coconut tree in Goa and be putting my way to glory for something in the Silicon Valley.
No, absolutely. I think that is possible. As I said, that technologically it is possible. There is no doubt about it. But at the same time, when you are talking about engineering R&D and safety critical kind of things, I think it needs a little more. As I said, that you really need to have the right processes, right culture, understanding to bring everything together to make it to deliver something to the customer. So I feel that that could be a challenge. But having said that, certainly we need to be watchful about it. Where we need to be watchful about it is where it is low skill and highly what is called automated. And that is something we need to be really watchful, because if the interventions are less, if it is automated and then probably it is low skill, it can still happen. That is what my personal view is.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. We also spoke about right in our opening thoughts about how the technology landscape is evolving from smack to dark. Raghav, then you mentioned that this is the fastest decaying knowledge is in the IT industry, 50% that disappears. Anand, if we go again to your world, and if we see what's happened over the last few decades, from a specialized hardware world to an increasingly software-driven world on generic chipsets, to again now with IoT and multi-energy, multi-climate condition requirements, some specialization beginning to come in. What does that mean from two lenses? From a young engineer's perspective, what does he or she need to inculcate, either as habits or as education or training, to be able to keep up? And secondly, from an enterprise perspective, what do companies need to do to manage this fast-paced changing paradigm all around them?
Very good question. Sumit, I'm still reeling under that imagery you created of a guy sitting in Goa and coding away to glory, and wish I could do that. But back to your question. When I started my career as a chip designer in the Bay Area, one of the reasons I wanted to move out of it after a few years was I could not connect it to any outcome, right? Mm-hmm. You could be working on a small little block on a silicon. Again, and small is not to trivialize the amount of work, but if you're working on a small block, you're verifying it or creating a small IP, not knowing what module, what system, what customer ends up actually using it, the connect was always so important and critical, right? And when we hired these very smart young graduates from IITs and the top colleges in the country, we find they traditionally want to work in professions where the connect is very viable and visible, right? Like, hey, listen, I code for a Flipkart or a Myntra or Paytm. I can see it. I can see what I do show up in a very tangible, visible, obvious way. Sometimes semiconductor can be abstracting, right? It's a little old school that way, because we're still like, hey, listen, we're designing chips which are kind of getting challenged by the laws of physics, and more and more difficult innovation. So it is taking some of the young engineers a little bit of, it needs a lot of patience to hang in there literally before you start connecting the dots and being able to see the contributions of yours on a daily basis, connecting and helping us in a certain vertical or a business. So that's a challenge we have on the talent acquisition side. And very often we see young talent, young kids want to work in a more obvious area where the customer connect and market outcomes are much more visible. Well, but that said, what we see in our domain is, with respect to software, I'm not going to diminish the value of software, but I'm still old school. If you don't have the silicon, you cannot do anything, right? You need the chip for almost everything that all the controls we talk about. I think of the entire universe as a three basic building blocks. You have a compute, you've got to compute something, you've got to store and save, then you have to have an analog system that kind of sends it out to the entire world, right? If you don't have those three systems playing in tandem, no data center, no smartphone, no automotive, no nothing will work. So I think in India, semiconductor is a challenging profession for some people for the reasons I just mentioned. So we are creating our own playbook to make sure that people rotate, people move around, so that they don't lose out on the joy of innovating in some small silos before they get to see the outer world. And one of the challenges we have, and thankfully the growth in the India mobile market is helping. You can actually solve customer problems. We all love to do that, right? So when you have a more integrated design center that kind of has a lot of missing blocks, you can architect, you can design, you can implement, you can take it to market, and then you can be involved in customer returns and customer issues, debug. When you have that kind of a change set up, you see engineers more willing and wanting to live through and learn, innovate, and hang in there. Otherwise, you end up losing them, very smart people, and they end up becoming a hedge fund investor or analyst in New York and not designing chips, which is such a shame.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. And so, Raghav, from your viewpoint, right? Again, Anand's world is probably still, I won't say straitjacketed, is still one universe. In your world, in the services and R&D world, where we deal with so many different sorts of client situations, different sorts of needs, etc. What needs to happen to be able to manufacture the talent at the velocity that's needed? It also ties into a question that Srinivasu P has sent in, that demand's going up 20x in the next 5 years. How do we manufacture that talent, and how do we manage the diversity of skill sets that's needed?
Yeah, so I'll probably divide that into 2 parts. Certainly, whatever Anand said, I'll take it from there, because the top people, experienced people on one side, and the other one is on the skill side, right? I mean, if you really look at the people who are coming out of school, they're born with gadgets. They can really play with that very, very well. So if you're really looking at the skill part of it, many times I feel that these people are much, much better compared to the experienced ones. And they can really do a much better job. That is what I have seen from my own experiences in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. The people coming out of schools, and then they put them on the job, they do much better job at that. But when you look at the experience, what we need to look at is specifically the people have the domain knowledge, the experience, they have the product knowledge, and they have the technology part. So we need to really see how we can really combine these from the perspective of this. So if you are looking at these skills, what we are doing here, I think we need to really take and see how we can really train, because still there is a gap between what academic schools teach versus what the industry has. So there are many, you look at this NASSCOM program, right? I mean, how to, the future skill program, how do we really build this gap on one side? And the second thing is that also inside, if you really look at what is happening inside the organization, maybe because this change that is happening in terms of technology, maybe there is a need to not only upskill, but also to reskill the people, whoever are there. Maybe sometimes there were jokes earlier saying that the top services companies go on and take the chemical engineer, mechanical engineer, civil engineer, make them IT engineer. Maybe that is all going to be useful now, because you know how to because all those skills are required now when the whole convergence is happening. So I'm only saying that how can we really reskill them, and also make sure that on a continuous basis, many corporations have developed their own academies just to ensure that they are completely continuously upgraded, so that the changing technology at the pace that it is happening in the industry, they're always relevant. And if they don't do that, I think they will lose out. I feel that from that perspective, we cannot get these people naturally from outside. We need to develop internally on one side. The second thing is that we need to keep the people also. It is especially when Anand was talking about the senior people, how do we really keep that talent? And now with the kind of the things that is coming up, the Corona has brought in, I think this hybrid mode of working is going to be normal. And maybe it will bring a diverse workforce also into the system. But at the same time, the stickiness, emotionally connecting the engineers or the managers to the organization probably will go down. So maybe different kinds of, maybe the agreement with them or the engagement should happen. I think that's all going to start coming out once this COVID impacts are going to get over. That's what I see in general.
Excellent. So you brought in some interesting points, Raghav, right, around the domain capability experience, the technical capability experience. I'll actually ask a controversial question back to both of you, right? And I'd say, is experience overrated, right? 9 years of experience, which is truly 1 year's experience 9 times over, versus true diverse 3 years of experience. How do you as leaders see the significance of that, and what guidance you would have for hiring managers, as well as for younger engineers who are probably at the beginning of their, or in the early parts of their careers, and still have a long road or journey ahead? What would your advice be? I'll start with you, Raghav, from both these dimensions, right? One for the hiring managers, where, as I said, 1 year's experience 9 times overs for 9-year tenure versus truly diversified 3 years experience. How to judge that out, how to value that, and same thing for a young professional, how to build that diversity and richness in their experience.
So from my perspective, I think the experience is certainly overrated, as you said that, because for me, experience is not really should be a metric or the criteria. It should be the knowledge. Because how exactly the people really, I found this mix quite well. There are some certain young guys who really have the best knowledge, specifically in the kind of dynamics that is happening in terms of technology in the industry, versus the really experienced people probably may not be as good. So I'm saying that for the hiring managers, I would say that it's the knowledge that should really drive it, not the experience amount. That is one certainly. But at the same time, if you look at the way the software is coming into the products, wherever it is applied, Semicon also, because it has to run on that, taking that, but still the life cycle of this products for introduction has changed. Right? I mean, it has come down to 3 months, 6 months. So now, because of that reason, the people, we are looking at full stack engineers. It is not just one, because it's really, it has the cycle time has reduced. And because of that reason, we really need to do it very fast, agile. And on one side, and also on the other side, we do not even know what the direction the industry takes. So because of that reason, you should always be ready to move any way you want. And that is the kind of situation that we are getting into. So because of that reason, we need to look at, from my perspective, especially for the hiring managers, people who are open to learning and then flexible to adapt. These are the two characteristics probably I would tell the hiring managers when they're hiring, whether it is experienced or the young one. For the experience, probably I would say look at the knowledge rather than it.
And what about the youngsters or people who are young professionals who are building their careers? What would your advice be to them? I'm sure Raghav and Anand, everybody who is in the early or in the middle parts of their career, they would all be aspiring to be like you someday. And both of you have taken very diverse paths, diversity of jobs, roles, geographies to get to where you are. What would your advice be to those youngsters who are probably watching today or are gonna watch a recording? How to build their careers? What should this new opportunity? How does the talent paradigm translate into great growth opportunities for them?
I mean, Anand, you want to go?
I'll take a step then. Okay. So, just quickly answering your previous question, Sumit, I'll give you a boring answer. We need both. We need both young people and experienced people, but not experience as measured in the physical years of experience, right? Experience in terms of what have you done as a body of work, and you could have accomplished a lot in 10 years of your tenure, right? So clearly a mix is required. In fact, at Micron, we make it a point. We hire a lot from colleges, and it's worked well for us. And to Raghav's earlier point, what we love about young professionals are they ask questions that senior people don't want to ask, right? It's like, there's no fear. And we hire a guy with engineering physics background. He comes in, he starts doing chip design. He doesn't know methodology, he doesn't know tools, but he's asking questions that have never been asked before. And we love it, right? And that itself is a part of innovation. So we need both. To your question on advice for young people, I think, as I say, right, I think I'm a big fan of geographical and functional exposure. I think if you look at some of the successes that Japanese companies have had, they have a very beautiful way of moving a young engineer through a series of functions. We don't have the luxury, because once a guy becomes very good in a function, we want to keep him there because we don't want to lose him. And the fear of losing him makes him or her stay in the same function and stop actually contributing after a period of time. So companies that rotate talent well, both geographical exposure and functional exposure, end up creating good leaders. I benefited from it early on in my life. So that is clearly something, if your company is not doing it for you, I recommend professionals to ask and demand, which means you've got to get out of your comfort zone. You've got to go and take a function you haven't done before, or work in a culture or a geographical context that you don't understand fully, right? So that would be one advice. And second is, I think keep and to Raghav's earlier comment, it's a no-brainer. You have to have the attributes. Eventually, most successful leaders have built careers on the premise of having the right attributes of high integrity, because one reason India is doing well is because our IP laws, in spite of everything that we say, India is still considered to be a safe country for doing R&D, research, patent, and innovation. So we should preserve that. Our engineers should have that integrity to make sure that what they create remains within the confines of the company they work for or the group they work for. High integrity, commitment, and I say this to all engineers: don't jump around, please. Hang in there, be patient, because if you've not done 3 cycles of a product innovation, you haven't done it yet, right? And if you're jumping too often, you're missing out on an opportunity and as well as learning.
Okay. Just to just to add to what Anand said, all those things are very, very critical and important from my perspective. Especially, it talks about how the person should be when he wants to really build his own career in the industry. But in addition to that, if you go back and then look at what Harvard Business School study says, is that most of the times we have this knowledge coming to us between 5 and 25. We have the maximum knowledge that we get, and after that it starts going down. So what they say that if we don't continue to have this update our knowledge after 25, the way that we did between 5 and 25, we are going to become obsolete in the current situation. So my advice to them is that they have to be relevant and they should continuously updating the knowledge in addition to what Anand was talking about.
Perfect. This is excellent. And I'll take this to the last leg of this conversation before we pick up a few questions. And Justin, please let us know if we are falling behind on time, but we'll try to wrap this up fairly aggressively. Last part, and I'll start with you, Anand, right? Gig economy intersects tangentially with everything that we've spoken about in the last 30 odd minutes. I want to come in, do a gig and maybe move on from a project at Micron to the next one at STS or someplace else. How does that work? Is that something that R&D organizations can tap into, or is that something that R&D organizations would possibly see as a threat? IP implications. In fact, somebody asked that question. Abhishek also asked in that question. Working from anywhere could be an IP risk as well. How do you see it in your world, Anand? And then I'll come to you, Raghav, where you have a third axis of the end customer as well. But how do you see the gig economy intersecting with all of this?
Yeah, so it is very pervasive. It is visible, and to each his own, right? And you make decisions on your career, and you got to live with it. We don't see it very favorably, to be honest. The worry here is some of the verticals we serve have a 2 to 3 year kind of a cycle time. But what you design, what gets into production, what gets returned as a fail, if you don't live through the life cycle of a product, which is a great opportunity, right? My only worry is a gig kind of a mindset is missing out on that ability and opportunity to kind of live through a life cycle well, and that learning the precious. Because once you do that a few times over, you become indispensable, and your career options open up. So to each his own again, but I prefer folks who live through a little more. And maybe I'm old school, but that's what I believe in personally.
Fair enough. Raghav, your take.
From my perspective, I think that is around the corner. I think right now it is not there, but as things change and these technologies really come up and then go down so fast, that certainly would, become grow much more than what it is today. That's what I see. But from the customer perspective, I feel that can be a threat to the services organization, because it's a gig economy. So I'm seeing that there would be a lot more what we call stickiness. There will be different kinds of operating models to the customers, or the business model that will come up with the customers. We have the stickiness of the customers. Maybe risk sharing kind of things. Maybe there are pains because COVID situation has really put many companies falling in different kind of distress. So maybe joint venture partnerships or even risk sharing kind of models might come up, where you need to have a stickiness so that quality doesn't really affect you. That's how I see it in the customer perspective.
Excellent. Well, Anand, Raghav, thank you so much. This has been very, very insightful. And if I could draw sort of two or three top takeaways from this. One is what Alvin Toffler wrote way back in the 70s: learn, unlearn, relearn. That is more relevant now than ever, both from the perspective of how organizations look at it and what the industry or the market demands, and the fact that COVID has taught us ways to figure out ways and means to work from anywhere. I think the talent pool is going to go global, and maybe it's an opportunity for countries like India to start a reverse brain drain and continue to grow at the clip that we are growing. But hey, gentlemen, thank you so much. This was very, very insightful, very, very interesting. I definitely picked up a thing or two. And to all the youngsters who are out there looking to build up your careers, well, as Anand said, to each their own. if you want to, jump from gig to gig with a sortie into Goa or to the mountains in between, that's your choice, versus building up a sticky career with a few life cycles and sitting with a suit in a boardroom. But thank you so much. Very interesting, very insightful. And Justin, back over to you.
Thanks, Sumit. Thanks, Anand.
Thank you, Sumit.
It was a pleasure. Yeah.
Pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Sumit, for moderating that session. And thank you once again, Anand and Raghav, for joining us on that session. Thank you for your insights on the changing talent paradigms of the ER&D and the importance of new age talent in today's era of rapid digitalization. All right, now the last session of today's Experts Forum is on the topic Rethinking Engineering R&D Service Delivery. In this session, our stalwart speakers will discuss about how organizations can stay relevant to their customers and provide differentiated service delivery while tackling the dynamic challenges such as reducing costs, optimizing resources, and maintaining and managing a remote and hybrid workforce. So without further ado, let me welcome Piyush Jain, Vice President and Global Delivery Head Software and Digital Services at Quest Global, who will be moderating this session. A very brief introduction. Piyush is responsible for managing delivery execution and operations of delivery units across all global locations. His career of 28 plus years spans telecommunications, networks, virtualization, media, semiconductor, high-tech, and electronics verticals. Now, over the years, Piyush has built, scaled, and managed engineering and product R&D service centers across global client locations. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, Piyush. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for welcoming us. I am, thankful to NASSCOM for the engineering showcase event. It's my pleasure to be here leading the panel discussion, a very interesting one too. In fact, I was listening to the earlier two panel discussions, and a lot of interesting topics were discussed, particularly around innovation and talent, and both of them are very, very essential for the topic that we are going to discuss now, which is the service delivery. But before we start, at the outset, I'd like to check that everyone is keeping safe and healthy. Thankfully, the second wave seems to be receding, but the virus threat continues. Please do stay safe. Follow the guidelines. Vaccination is important, so please do take care of it. Now, coming to engineering service delivery. Now, this has been something that the ER&D space has matured over many years in India, and we have been working on this for many years. All the organizations in the ER&D space have been doing this. And we have today a very robust system that has been set up to provide top-class delivery to our customers, whether it is the cost benefits that we give or the value-driven benefits that we provide to our customers. And the service delivery has evolved over time. It was not like this, what we see today. We have matured and we have come a long way from the days where it was just about body shopping to the days where we now manage the complete ownership of products from our customers. We actually have large-scale ODC setups done across multiple organizations. We have large-scale GCC setups in the country where our customers have their own shops where they're doing a lot of engineering R&D work here. So we have come a long way. But looks like things have to be changed as we move forward because pandemic has brought in a lot of new things that were not anticipated before. So in the last 2 years, I think every organization in the R&D space has undergone tremendous amount of change. And some of this change has become almost paradigm shifts. A lot of conventional thinking around service delivery, whether it was remote working, virtual working, has been broken. It used to be an exception earlier. It has almost become the norm. And going forward, we may see evolution of the working models in the industry because that's where the change is taking place. Another positive impact of the pandemic, perhaps the only positive impact of the pandemic, was the acceleration of the digital technology infusion in the industry. And we will talk about that as well as we get through the discussion. So before I get into the discussion, I would like to introduce my two eminent panelists. They have been leaders for multiple decades in the industry. They have shaped the way engineering service delivery has happened in the industry in their respective organizations. So it's my pleasure to welcome Jacob Peter. He is a Senior Vice President with Robert Bosch Engineering and Business Solutions Private Limited. Jacob has been with Robert Bosch for almost 2 decades, and he has played multiple roles at Robert Bosch. Today, he heads the unit which is responsible for IT, ITES, engineering tools, and mechanical engineering services. And prior to that, he was actually leading the global sales team and was instrumental in accelerating growth for non-captive businesses for Robert Bosch Engineering India, which is the largest engineering setup for Robert Bosch outside of Germany. So welcome to the panel, Jacob.
Hey, thank you, Bush. Thanks.
I will also, with pleasure, invite Sundaresh Shankaran. He is the president of manufacturing and CPG at ITC Infotech. Sundaresh has been in the industry for almost 3 decades. And through this experience, he has actually been involved in strategy, delivery, operations. He has led to optimization of operations across entire supply chain and enhance the customer experience, and has been instrumental in setting up the engineering setup for Infosys way back when he was with Infosys. Today, he actually heads the manufacturing and CPG vertical globally for ITC Infotech. And I look forward to a very engaging discussion with both Sundaresh and Jacob. So welcome aboard to this panel discussion, Sundaresh.
Thank you, Piyush, for the generous introduction.
Right. So gentlemen, let's get started. So one of the points that came to my mind first, as we looked at this topic of rethinking engineering service delivery in the ERD space, was about the changes that pandemic has brought about, particularly the working models. So we have seen in the past how in the ERD space has evolved the delivery models over time, from plain and simple time and material to a lot more engaged managed services kind of models. But pandemic has introduced something new, wherein remote working and virtual working is becoming the norm. And the organizations are now looking forward to almost a hybrid kind of a working model. It is still I would say still on the design table. I think companies are still trying to figure out how it will work. But in my view, it is definitely going to come. So my question to both of you, and we'll start with Jacob, you first. As you look at this hybrid working model coming in, how do you see that impacting the engineering service delivery, particularly, let's say, from a GCC like Robert Bosch? How do you see this change affecting the way the working delivery model works at Robert Bosch and the partners that you work with?
Hey, thanks for the question, Piyush. Just a small clarification. I'm responsible for automotive now. I've moved on from IT. I think it's a good point. We are in the epicenter of a once in an event century. And it's too hard to take any kind of guess how this will move in terms of any kind of models that we are exposed to, because we are right in the middle and we have taken some actions so that the business goes on. If you look at our 3 main stakeholders, employees, if you look at them, they would like flexibility. Many of them would like this to continue. Many of them would like to come back to office. So this is where the hybrid comes in. If you look at our customers, they want predictable delivery at the end of the day. And they also want us to take care of the security and risks associated with the delivery, because we are working on products, and any leakage is a big impact for their business. So that's top of their mind. And if you look at organizations, we anchor all of this. We want innovation. That means the serendipity and people coming together is important. And the gig working, as we call it, we need to enable it. All of this would move towards, if you take an ODC, maybe it will go to a virtual ODC, where the confines of space may not dictate what the model would be. It would be more the elements of what you want to deliver and how you enable it irrespective of the space limitations. This would be one of the aspects. The second aspect is how would organizations enable it? Because especially in product engineering, we do a lot of work on hardware, very close to hardware. So how do you enable these aspects to be done remotely? So there's a lot of infrastructure support that needs to be done so that the testing, the virtualization, all of this are going to be high focus in the future. But one thing is clear, what we are looking at is more or less an irreversible change, because 2 years is too long, habits have set in. So you can't just pull back and say that all of you come back to office. That is gone. So we need to evolve this, what so-called hybrid. It's in the process of thought, and I'm sure that in the coming months, it will evolve.
Right. So just to extend that point that you made, Jacob, on particularly hardware and labs and those kind of things, which is a very part and parcel of the ERD space. right? So Sundaresh, if I extend that thought to you, and as an engineering service provider, we set up large ODCs for customers. We have lab setups and stuff like that. We have compliance issues, compliance guidelines that we need to adhere to in terms of delivering the work to customers. So when you look at hybrid today and the way it is evolving, how do you see that changing from a service provider perspective? In the sense, what kind of challenges do we foresee, and how do we plan to overcome those challenges?
Yeah, first of all, I think whatever Jacob mentioned, which is true for possibly a captive, is very true for service providers. The stakeholders are the same, which is the employees, the customers, a predictive delivery, and things like that. And when it comes to ER&D space, all of us know we are all more hands-on, possibly than the IT folks, right? Get up in the morning, you want to go to the office, possibly go to the lab, and then start seeing and doing certain things. So that definitely has got impacted. To some extent, it has been mitigated. In our case, we did shift some of our employees on site where it was critical to complete those when India was going through this. The second, we also prioritized those employees in the front line in the labs to come back to the labs with due vaccination and due checks by minimizing the number of people. Because as Jacob mentioned, I don't think we are still mature to say any kind of physical testing, any kind of lab thing also you can do sitting at home. Possibly it will come if this continues. But today we don't have it, and hence there is little bit of work to be done there. And that's one side of the things. Second side, even on the engineering side, there were a lot more stuff which were possibly required to come to the office. For example, a very large simulation that you needed to run, you had the large servers in the office, and hence you needed to do those kinds of things have got improved in the last whatever 1 year, right? Today, either we have moved it to the HPC on cloud, so employees can actually log in from home, and other small things in terms of larger monitor being available in their home, 2 large monitors, so that they can look at this engineering simulation, log into the HPC cloud and do that. The other things is like how do you actually check and validate a very huge drawing? If you remember, some of the ODCs have a large table, you spread that large drawing, people go around, look at it. How do you now do it, right? So there are certain tools of overlay and things like that have come in place today, which means portion of it is today possible to do virtually, digitally. Portion of it where it needs physical, I don't think I figured out the 100% solution. And hence when it becomes hybrid, I think we need to prioritize, maybe rotate people between who work in the labs to the other ones. And as Jacob said, the security infra, even for example, we had large servers, people sitting and trying to do simulation. If you connect it through VPN and connect to that server and do remote, was much more less efficient. So some of those have been ironed out, but there are a lot more to do. But I agree, hybrid is there to stay. And I think if some more work is done, a lot more other stuff also can be done in a remote fashion.
Yeah, so actually just to, so you touched upon an interesting aspect. In fact, both you and Jacob touched upon that, about the advent of digital technologies in a lot of ways. You guys kind of talked about how today we are having new tools that have come in, or enhancement of tools have happened for us to do the work remotely, or flexible model by which you do it remotely, and sometimes a little bit of physical activity involved. So, and my view, I think one of the positives of pandemic has been the acceleration on digitization. I think digitization was always there. It was moving at a pace. The consumer-facing industry had it a lot more going than perhaps the industrial world. But like automotive, for example, and Jacob, you may want to enlighten us a little bit more on that. Automotive has been on the forefront when it comes to industrial sector on adopting digital technologies. So as this digital acceleration happens, and it is also going to have an impact in the way engineering service delivery happens, how do you see this entire technology play moving from here? In the sense, what do you see is the impact that we can see immediately, and what do organizations need to prepare to encash this digital technology that is coming in for their benefit and the customer's benefit?
Yeah, I mean, I'll take this question from 2 fronts. One of the automotive industry and the other is the ER&D player. As an ER&D player, I mean, as normal people, what has happened is the acceleration of digital due to this pandemic has been amazing. My sister sells plants. She's in a village in Kerala, and she sells plants online. I mean, I couldn't even imagine this happening 1 year back. So people have taken on to digital in a very, very, in a way that you didn't have a choice. So it's more of necessity is the mother of invention. So this has pervaded all parts of life, whether it be a user of a car or an ER&D enterprise. For an ER&D enterprise, if you look through our value chain, it is going to impact all parts, from a talent acquisition, how we screen our resumes, to how you onboard our associates, how do you skill them. Gone are the days of classroom trainings. I mean, people have got used to getting online and getting trained. So you get in that. How would you engineer a product? What kind of tools do you use? How do you enable people with, as we say, remotely connect? So your infrastructure could be anywhere. I mean, until now, we were all working on labs and labs nearby, and the engineers work very close to the lab. We are thinking of centralized labs now, which are going to be big ones, and like cloud labs, you can connect from anywhere. So this would be the digitalization that would come in the engineering, and of course in the ops. And this is another part which is already accelerated. If you look at automotive industry, earlier when you buy a car, what would you look at? How powerful it is, what's the look and the feel. But now connectivity is determining choice, because the buyers are from a different generation. Gone are the Gen X and baby boomers generation. Now when a youngster goes in, it's about how well does he connect to your mobile? What is the connected features of a car? So even the strategy of automotive companies have revolved around personalization, automated driving, connectivity, and of course the green part of it. How does electrified come into our picture? So you see that digitalization envelops the complete value chain of companies, and the way it would alter would determine at the end of the day by two people, the user. Whether the user is an employee or whether he's a user is a driver of a car, they would determine how digitalization would come into it. The big impact is people are comfortable with digitalization, and that's a huge, huge bit. And I think that's something again irreversible. And for us, it's going to be something in a way we will have to transform as enterprises.
So Sundaresh, your thoughts on the same, so as a engineering service provider, what sort of investments should engineering service providers look at to see how to, take advantage of the digital wave that is coming up, both for our internal, processes and, the way we do service delivery to the benefits that can go to the customer.
Yeah, when Jacob was mentioning about plans being sent, see, in even very large mature organizations, if you had to have a video conference with the customer, we used to do a preparation. We used to do a dry run. So all of that has changed. I don't think technology advancement has been so great, but it is just because of the need of the hour, it has actually come in, right? So that's the acceleration that is happening in digitalization, because my phone power never goes off now. I don't have to charge because you are on laptop and on Teams. You just don't use the phone. So if you ask me, was there no Teams, no Zoom? It was all there. So the acceleration of digitization, because of that culture barrier has been broken, is definitely the reason which is there. What we need to prepare for is, see, lot of manufacturing which was thought to be you enter the factory, then go do things, is all moving into remote. We had a very important project which had a very tight timeline. In the normal situation, we should have had a large team visiting the factory in France, doing all the assessments, come back and then do the execution. Whereas here, of course, we had 1 or 2 people visit little later, but we had the frontline workers there wearing real-time kind of headsets. So we were looking at the factory from here, collecting the data. And these kinds of technologies we need to invest, because it is going to tomorrow become, not because you cannot visit the factory, but the customers don't want a lot of intervention inside the factory. And if that same job can be done from outside, right, is that area that we need to definitely look at. Second is a lot of manufacturing workloads are moving to cloud. The similar example, it was cloud not there, was manufacturing data, why was it on-prem? It was all cultural and there was no need. So today, people are finding solutions to see if latency is the problem, they're putting edge devices, then they're moving that to the cloud so that remote monitoring by their own staff, collecting remote data, all of that is a major area which is investments that the customers are doing. As service providers, we need to look at and see that this is the one which we need to embrace. I am not touching upon what Jacob touched upon in terms of even in our own operations, onboarding people when they come in and join, they're not even coming to the campus. So all of those are other interventions that we need to. We cannot forget providing that assurance to the customer on IP and it is safe. Just because it is remote, it is not like anybody can access anything. So we need to do those preparations, and that way we will be more prepared to take on this. Piyush.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm getting some interesting questions, gentlemen. I'll come to the questions in a minute. So just to extend the point that we were discussing around, digital technologies and how it is actually changing the way we do work, the way we do service delivery, and also how the benefits can be given to the customer. Now, one aspect about engineering service delivery that has had a lot of discussion and debate in the past as well is about the engagement models, particularly the engagement models around outcome-based or risk and reward. Now, we have seen, the companies, some of them have been successful in that, some of them have not been very successful in that. In your view, how do you see that changing with the, with let's say, is there a benefit on those models with digital technologies or the way the, service delivery is expected to change? Do you see any significant change coming in there, or how do you see those models becoming more prevalent, more popular going forward? Sundaresh, why don't you share your views around those models? And then maybe we can hear from Jacob as well. When he looks at those models to be built, let's say with providers, how does he go about thinking about them, and what sort of changes are needed on that to make them more prevalent?
Yeah, see, the outcome-based models is always very attractive to the customer when you begin with, because it kind of gives them the predictability. They're not paying just for a service, but there is an assured benefit that they're going to get and things like that. However, I think there are multiple challenges that has to be addressed, not just from the service provider, but from the customer side as well, right? Which is about, is there a baseline of what is the current performance? Is the impact that is going to be created on the outcome just based on the service, or there are other aspects? For example, there is an adoption aspect. You can bring that benefit only if the customers, various business units adopt what has been kind of delivered, right? So then a deeper domain knowledge to actually understand the impacts. So some of these aspects is where I think a lot more work needs to be done to have both sides convinced that it is a very good model to work. Because I think what I have seen is when you do that pitch, customer is very excited. We want to do it. But at some point in time, all business stakeholders on both sides are not able to come together because there are certain things to be still ironed out in terms of what is the baseline today and what is the improvement and things like that. Coming to the pandemic and the digital thing, to certain extent now, it is, I think the touch and feel and you have to be at my location was little overrated before the pandemic. Today, once customers went through this, their own employees were remote, they realized that even working remote, you can get the predictable delivery and deliverable, right? Given that, it gives you a little more push to take this outcome-based model. But I think the fundamental challenges that I talked about still needs to be ironed out. And I see that when the strength of the relationship with our customer is little longer, then it's a much more acceptable model.
Right. Jacob, your views?
Yeah, I think the classic models will stay, which is where you provide competency or you do projects for your partners or customers. What would shift the models more than the pandemic is the underlying way businesses is done now. If I take automotive industry as an example and the kind of work that we do, earlier we used to sell what we call as electronic control units as one unit. But now the architecture is changing. The car architecture itself, what we call as E-architecture, is going a fundamental change. Unlike having some 100 small ECUs in the car, OEs are going more towards centralized, very big computers, what we call as domain computing. What this brings about is there's a decoupling between hardware and software. So it's no longer sold as one piece. You can source hardware from one player, and you can possibly source software from other players. Until now, if you see, the core competency has been mechatronics, around which automobile was built. And mechanical and electronics to the fusion. But now it's more and more the USP, as I told earlier, is moving to software. So the models are being dictated by not only the cost aspect, because earlier, if you see a fixed price, there is a risk sharing. It's also what you bring onto the table in terms of what responsibility can you take end to end. Let me give an example. There's a feature known as eCall in cars. It's just recently introduced in India by a premium car manufacturer, which we are operating for them. It involves from a point an event takes place, an accident. The sensor detects it. And then the event is passed on to a call center. And the call center talks with the person and assists him with either a medical help or some breakdown or something like that. Now, there's a full chain which has to work 100% every time. Now, either you can work as somebody who gives a piece of hardware to that, or a software inside of that, or somebody who can run the full chain. As an OE, I'm only interested in the value that functionality brings. I think the models will shift towards service providers thinking about holding these functionalities end to end. That's the big shift. And of course, the business models also could change, underlying business models. But your capability to hold the full chain would determine the way a conversation between a service provider and a OE or a tier one would happen. That would be a dominant shift in my view.
Okay. And interestingly, as you touched upon that, how the entire ecosystem sort of will possibly mature enough to change that. One of the elements of that, which has always been a point of discussion, is the IP management piece of it. So when, for example, looking at alternative models, risk reward, or you're looking for outcome based, and you're doing co-innovation together. And of course, a lot of work in this ecosystem happens where customers and the partners are all together in the ecosystem. It's all extension centers of engineering that are created. But large part of the service providers are actually working on the IP that the customer has built, and it's become an incremental IP that belongs to the customer. But as you see this, this entire, like you talked about, transformation of the ecosystem, and looking at it in totality and not just in bits and pieces, how do you see this IP management thing moving forward? Do you see that there will be changes to that as well to make it a lot more beneficial for both the customers and the partners to participate and innovate together on this? Any perspective on that, Jacob? And then Sundaresh, from your side as well.
Yeah, I mean, it will shift radically. I guess if you see IP as a concept, it was basically brought out so that an idea is seen by a wider world, and people can innovate on top of that. Of course, later on, IP became more like a protection and a barrier, which also is an important part. But recently, you saw Tesla opening up all the IPs so that anybody could use them. All of that is, of course, in vogue. But the reality is, as I'm talking about automotive. This is prevalent everywhere. The classic industry, if you see in a product segment, it's about designing once and manufacturing millions. And the money was made by selling those pieces. Whatever be it. It could be a blood pressure monitor, it could be an automotive ECU, or it could be a washing machine, dishwasher, whatever be it. That is the fundamental way product engineering companies work, right? You design once and make millions. Now that is getting shifted to everything as a service model. So you have intermediary value players coming in between. If you take the automotive value chain, you have the MSPs coming in between. And when they come, the IP they say is very different from what an automobile manufacturer sees as an IP. So the value of a piece of intellectual property in the entire chain changes depending on who looks at it. Because for Uber, an aggregator, a car may be white labeled. And for him, the key is the customer, holding the customer. So that's where the service providers also have to look beyond the classic models, where they also looked at IP in a way of making a small piece of software and trying to position it in a platform and maybe roll out the software faster. That's or you may get a multiplicity of if you use it as a license. The key is to understand the impact of IP in a altering value chain, and the value of an IP is not anymore dictated by that it is close to an hardware or whether it's on a cloud. It's the impact that it can make to the end customer and the amount of revenue generation capability that it has. That element is still, in my view, has not sunk in, especially into the R&D industry or to the service industry yet, the power that it has. And once that comes in my view, service industry, especially the Indian service industry, we can play a completely different game. The landscape of product engineering is changing at the roots. But in my view, Indian service industry is still rooted in the classical model. And that's a big jump we'll have to make.
Piyush, if I look at it from the service provider's lens, any IP connected with their product, I would hesitate to say there has been a reduction in their, I don't see any relaxation from their end. They continue to believe that IP should belong to them. And the second point is little related to what Jacob mentioned. Assume we have created a small IP as a service provider and that's going into the product. Their concern is also, if that has to be resold, that is going into multiple of their products into various customers, they don't want that hassle to come to us every time to get that permission to go forward and things like that. However, if it is not very closely connected to the product, but it is a new way of possibly acquiring data and things like that, which enables them and helps them, and that is where what is not their core, I see some movement in terms of they accepting that it's an IP from the service provider and they are very much okay with it. But in short, if it is an IP on their core product, even if it is a co-innovation, I do see reservations in customers being able to share it with us. The maximum they go to is in the IP, our engineers are named, whereas the IP still belongs to the OEM and the customer. So I just want to be real on the ground, and possibly in the future it will change, but that's how I see it today, Piyush and Jacob.
Yeah, so gentlemen, very interesting questions are coming up. Let me take the first question for us to respond. Why India has not been a front runner in providing specialized services, where billing should be very high? Why is India's service sector focused only on staff augmentation models? Which I don't believe is true. We are way beyond the staff augmentation models. In fact, perhaps in the early days of ERD space is where staff augmentation models were more prevalent. Not to say that they are not. Even now, staff augmentation models are used on need basis. But I think the industry has come a long way. But just to take that point, Sundaresh, from your standpoint, if you look at it, how the industry has evolved on service delivery and in terms of providing specialized services. How do you see that, as far as the industry is concerned today?
Yeah, as you rightly said, I think, first of all, it's not true. There's a lot of complete managed service, high-end complete ownership on the product and things like that. Again, I will not name the customers, but I will tell you, as a service provider, we were doing more core work than the captive was doing in India. So, which means there's a view that possibly service providers do a little bit of a later part of the life cycle kind of thing, but there are examples of how the complete product ownership and things like that have been done. But having said that, I think we will be not right if we say there's a lot of room to move up. I would say in the ER&D world, possibly we have moved up from detail engineering to possibly develop the concept itself. But I think we need to move further up to predict what is the market change and what kind of product should come and influence the direction. Only then you will see that impact to be service providers are trying to kind of play in that space. Otherwise, it is still, the product direction is still coming from the customers, and possibly you have taken more and moved more to the left in terms of your responsibility, right? That is how I see, but definitely it's not in a staff aug mode and just tasks are given. And I think that's all actually gone way back. Even in the past, I think selective few customers used to actually do core development along with the partners. I think that will accelerate and there is no reversal on that, is how I see.
Right. Jacob, when you look at GCCs, right, and GCC also have come a long way. I think the initial days was to see how they can provide the labor arbitrage, cost arbitrage to set up, setups here and provide maintenance services. But I think a lot of innovation is happening. For example, if you look at Robert Bosch, you have the largest engineering R&D center outside of Germany. So when you look at specialized services as a query that someone has asked, how do you see that GC is playing that role there today? Taking, let's say, Robert Bosch's example.
The question, I think we can answer saying that, we don't do so much of people arbitrage business, but in the minds of people, this industry is still rooted there. That's the challenge. The perception has not shifted, but the reality definitely has shifted. We do more high responsible work and all of that. To answer that question, fundamentally, there are two reasons. One is whether you operate in the technology domain or in the product domain. And product domain is extremely intensive in a domain understanding, while technology domain is what we call as horizontals. Having said that, I think we have not been able to get onto the technology bandwagon before a product company itself gets on. That's where we will be a leader. I mean, if you are a leader in AI or in a connectivity or how you handle data, I think the product companies will look upon to you to solve a problem. Are we there? There we are still not there. On a majority space, on a minority spaces, the journey that we have undertaken, what we did was we went for doing the products ourselves. So rather than looking at our partners to drive a product strategy and we being a part of it, we took a different approach. We said that why don't we try to do products which would be right for the Indian market? So the connectivity product that Bosch rolls out in India is completely done out of us. That means we hold the P&L also. You have products which monitors an energy consumption very seamlessly. It's called Phantom. And on health space, we do products which are completely starting with India, which goes to a global space. So it's possible when you get closer to a product. On the horizontal space, technologies like AI, we have been able to make teams out here, but these teams are again supporting the global product lines. It is not created IP which potentially alters the equation in terms of we seen as the leader. We are among the two centers of competency for both artificial intelligence and user experience, but they have not captured the imagination in such a way that somebody comes and say, hey, here's Robert Bosch, and they are known for artificial intelligence. That has not happened. And that's the reason why this question has a lot of relevance, because the impact has not happened.
Piyush, just to add on, what also happens is, see, if you are the product owner, then you also have to invest in doing maybe very expensive physical testing as well. As a service provider, possibly that's not an area where it is your strength, and hence what happens is portion of the product development still has to be owned by the OEM, and that is how possibly it is looked up as something is done, but finally the OEM has to take charge to release the product to the market. So that could be another reason that perception is there, because we can't do that very expensive testing. Yeah, especially when the product becomes complex, the testing becomes much more complex. Right.
Very interesting. So the next question is more on 5G. What kind of a role is 5G going to play in overcoming physical presence of personnel in the labs and offshore centers? So 5G, I mean, I'll take that to start with. 5G definitely will have a big impact. I mean, if you look at the future, Internet of Things or Internet of anything that people are talking about, and industrial IoT, which is going to be a big part of ERD space, where companies are going to invest in trying to have more and more factory automation done, more and more asset tracking done through the solutions like IoT and stuff. It will have a significant impact, but there is a long way to go. Particularly in India, I think 5G is going to take some time. Very early trials have started. I think some of the other countries have taken steps forward on that. And 5G is meant largely to support IoT and IIoT. So let's see, how fast we can get onto the 5G bandwagon. There's another interesting question, Jacob and Sundaresh. How will the new data protection bill in India impact service delivery? Now, as I understand, the data protection bill obviously is more in the lines of, let's say, GDPR guidelines that are already there in Europe, and we have kind of adopted those guidelines as we work with customers in delivering work out of Europe. So now that the bill is yet to come, I think in India formally, I think it's still under discussion. So no specific comment on the bill for India. But when you look at GDPR experience of in Europe and look at service delivery that we need to do to comply with GDPR, any specific inputs that you have in terms of how it has impacted service delivery and how we need to possibly look at the way it will move forward in other regions as well? Jacob, maybe we can start with you and then Sundaresh.
Yeah, GDPR is again a very high impact legislation for the European Union. Data is the new oil, they say, so everybody takes some method to protect it. The key is, it's almost 4% of the entire revenue of the group that is under threat if somebody breaches it. So it's a high impact element. So one is on a contractual level. There are a lot of contracts that are drawn out for GDPR. On the mitigation level, we really have a lot of checks and technology layers which sees to it that the data breach doesn't happen. And this has to be audited at regular intervals, both an audit from our side and also independent audits. Because of the high impact nature of these contracts, we have to be extremely careful in taking up work which could potentially impact the privacy data, especially. This is mainly onto the personal data and privacy data. So in the engineering realm, it doesn't affect so much as it is in the IT area, where much more of the personal data is happening. But it's just a matter of time because of all this connectivity and cloudification that will come to us also. So from a security, data breach and audits and platforms and processes that we use, we have to be extremely robust if you have to be on a sure ground on this.
Sundaresh, because we're almost out of time. So your views on this?
Yeah, from a service provider perspective, if you look at GDPR, as Jacob said, it's a very high impact legislation. But as a service provider, we are a data processor. We are not the data controller. So we have to put checks and balances in place, systems, training, educating people to ensure the data that is entrusted to us by customer, on that we follow everything related to GDPR. Where I'm going is possibly for somebody like Jacob and OEMs which operate, they also will be the data controller and their responsibility will be much far higher. Whereas for a service provider, we need to ensure the data that we receive from our customers is as per whatever the GDPR guidelines are, right?
Yeah, thank you, Sundaresh and Jacob. So we are almost out of time, folks. A lot of other interesting questions are there, but I guess we may have to take those questions offline through NASSCOM. So it was a pleasure to be on the panel discussion today on the interesting topic of rethinking service delivery in ER&D space. ERD space is doing very well. I think we have a lot of potential to innovate on this space. I think the ecosystem is very robust. Innovation and talent, the other two topics of discussion today, pointed out how we can actually enhance the ERD presence in India. So I think all of us are excited about the future. The only thing is that pandemic should end as soon as it can. So do keep safe. And thank you so much, Jacob. Thank you, Sundaresh, for being on the panel. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Piyush. Thank you, Sundaresh, and stay safe.
Yeah. Back to you, Justin.
Thank you so much, Piyush, for summing that last session up so well. And of course, for moderating that session, we'd also like to thank Jacob, Peter, and Sundaresh for being on the panel. Thank you all. for that insightful and energetic discussion on re-engineering R&D service delivery from both the manufacturing and the service provider point of view. Thank you once again for your candid perceptions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we draw curtains on the Experts Forum, I once again thank all our speakers for joining us this morning and sharing their insights and expertise with us. We'd also like to thank you, the viewers, and I hope each of these sessions provided key insights and best practices to learn from, grow, and to be future ready. The main event, I'd like to remind all of you, later in the day will be a spectacle worth remembering. We will witness high-impact stories of innovation, service delivery excellence, and unique talent capabilities from India. We'll also be discussing the challenges and best practices to leverage India's full potential in engineering R&D, deliberate on new paradigms of talent, and honor the pioneers and change makers in Indian engineering R&D. In addition, I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that we have a virtual booth tour on Expo platform where you can connect with the sponsors of the event with your specific queries. So we'd like to encourage all of you to please visit the virtual booth tour. Also, we have a specially curated ER&D studio where you can listen to the stories of the shortlisted nominees, testimonials of global CXOs on India Advantage, and videos of jury members sharing their application evaluation experience. All that and so much more. Well, looking forward to being your host in for the main event of our great Odyssey this evening. This is your host, Justin Jacobs, signing off for now. Stay tuned for the main event later in the day. Take care.